gives her address. Something else that is emotive and will be going on today is the issue of the finance bill, and really more so because it touches on everyday people, and as well as that fuel tax that was proposed to be cut in half to 50%, that is to 8% rather, and that is something that will be in the initial process of debating. It will start today. Of course, the debate proper will be on Thursday, but today 2:30, in under 3 hours, Bwana Tindi Mwale, you Butere Member of Parliament, you will be in Parliament to represent your views. First of all, it will be more of listening to the receiving the memorandum from the President. From your view, at the face of it, just to get your initial reaction, what do you expect to happen?
Thank you very much. To be very precise, today the Speaker is going to give the details of the memo from His Excellency the President. And I've been reading it in the media, and I got a leaked copy. And from where I stand, I won't support the memo. Okay,
so you're going to vote against it come Thursday?
I'm going to vote against it, because when you look at what the President is advocating for, he's basically going to make the lives of the common Kenyan very difficult.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is all about the Kenyan and not because of your interest having been infringed on?
Not really, because people are talking about MPs, we are against it because of the CDF, because of affirmative action. But you see, at the end of the day, the CDF goes to the common person. It doesn't come to our pockets. Because when you go to schools, like for example in my constituents, there's a school called Shanini Primary. I went there, I've built 4 classrooms. The school was having mud classrooms, and the students were suffering from jiggers and very bad conditions of learning. And I've gone there with the CDF. We have already erected 4 classrooms. And you see, now when you say that you are going to cut the budget, assuming you have cut the budget, those students will not be enjoying the 4 classrooms.
Touches people more directly, and it's across the board. You know, whether you're rich, whether you're, you know, middle class or even poor, it gets to you because it gets to our everyday spending. And someone might commend him by cutting it by half, but then some are saying it depends on how you're looking at it. It's actually still raised by 8%. So there's still, you know, higher, you know, demands to us on the pocket of the Mwananchi.
The good thing is that I've heard parliamentarians say something here that is quite true. We are using the wrong word, that we are reducing. We are actually increasing by 8%.
Yes.
We are not reducing it, because this taxation has never taken into effect. So we cannot talk about reduction. So the conversation should be, are we reducing it, are we increasing by 8% or 16%? Yeah, so that is the bigger thing that we need to talk about. And I'm glad that many people are getting the conversation going.
In his address on Friday, I'm sure you witnessed it, the State of the Nation address, he spoke first of some of the demands that, yes, things are hard for Kenyans, but we do need to run an economy, and that is why he is proposing, first of all, the 8% fuel levy, as well as the budgetary cuts, or to some extent, at government arms and departments. In your view, is that a good enough explanation?
I think it's not a good enough explanation, because when you look at what the President is proposing, you'll realize that most of the budget cuts and even the fuel levy taxation is just targeting things that affect the common Kenyan. For example, if I was the President, I would suggest a very big tax imposition on luxury goods, such as big cars, these big luxury vehicles, alcohol, these expensive clothes, where the rich will have to suffer. And therefore, if you don't want those things, you go for the basic needs, rather than going for the fuel, which inflates prices, especially on the common Kenyan.
But on the outlook of it for the country, is that something that can be sustained, just taxing the rich?
No.
From
I will differ a little bit. I think what I will encourage members of Parliament is that we have a very big budget.
Yes.
So what we can look at is how do we reduce the spending itself, because we are a very highly taxed country, and no matter what increases you make, even on luxury goods, you'll get a very few portion on what you target. So the bigger picture is not that we know we can target more taxes and get more. We need to reduce the spending. on the other hand, then we can manage the resources that we have on revenue on what we can spend.
Okay, and so and then there's also the issue of borrowing.
Yes,
there's what we're spending, there's what we can
Yeah.
tax,
Yes.
but then there's what we're borrowing,
Borrowing
which
also.
has been happening a lot. A real quick comment, and
Yeah,
then we take
especially when you look at the budget cuts. The president has proposed cuts, like, for example, on CDF, on money used for public participation, equalization fund. He has talked about the affirmative action. When you look at the things that he's proposing, they are the things that affect the common mwananchi. But he's very silent on the budget for the office of the president, State House, international trips. He's very silent on the Ministry of Defense. Every day we are buying artillery. Kenya is very peaceful, doesn't have any neighbor who is disturbing Kenya. Why doesn't he? He should go and cut those budgets rather than going to budgets that are going to affect the common lives of the common Kenyan.
Besides just affecting the lives of the common Kenyan, some might say it also affects your fortunes as a member of parliament, because CDF also makes you look good. But we're getting into that right now. Also the figures of our debt, the figures of the budget we're working with, and as well as how much more we're bringing in through the borrowing that we've been getting into, and the trips that you've said he has been making, as we come back on NTV Today. Stay with us. Welcome back to NTV Today, and in anticipation of what will be happening at Parliament in about 2.5 hours, that is a special sitting on a Finance Bill 2018 that has been sent back to Parliament by the President with recommendations and proposals, amendments that many have spoken about and against, and not so many voices that are outrightly saying they are in support of this particular finance bill with the amendment. But as we have been told at State House, there is a meeting with the Jubilee members of Parliament, and at Orange House there's also a meeting with opposition members of Parliament, all in the name of lobbying, getting the numbers so that they can consolidate the numbers that they would need to either push or fight these amendments that are being put forward by the President. And in the studio, we have a parliamentary member who says he is going to be against it, and he has his reasons, and we can look at the alternatives. But let's get to the figures right now in terms of, from Tony, we're looking at the budget that we have and the debt that we have.
Yes.
Where are we at, and is it something that we need to be worried about? Just last week, we had Principal Secretary saying that we are not in the red on international levels of debt. We are not in the red.
Yeah. We are in the red. I don't know why Treasury don't want to look at the truth. In terms of, you look at the IMF conditions, which were in the betterment of the Kenyans itself. It talked about that 3% physical deficit. We had 7%. You talk about inflation we've managed. We talk about debt servicing. We are using around 50% of our revenue collection to pay debts alone. In this fiscal year 2018-2019, we are going to pay 870 billion in servicing debt.
Yes.
So you put up the salaries and wages in public service, that is the public wage bill. Public wage bill is 700 billion. The previous year it was 679, it's expected to come to 700 billion. So you add 870 to 700, you get around 1.5 trillion. Revenue that KRA collected in this year that just ended is estimated to be around 1.4 trillion. So we are already on a deficit.
A negative there.
From the revenue allocation alone. We haven't factored in that there is revenue that is supposed to go to counties, 340, is not there. We talk about even judiciary, 15 billion, it's not there. We talk about parliament, that is 36 billion, it's not there. We talk about the ministries itself, it's not there. So we are in a crisis, especially on a cash crunch within Treasury. There is no money that we can facilitate. And the biggest issue that we are going into this fiscal year is that we are going to borrow because it's stated in the Constitution, we borrow for infrastructural projects.
Yes.
In this year, we are going to borrow to support also recurrent expenditure, which will be also unconstitutional. Those are the facts of the matter.
So we're in the red. Then someone would say, inevitably, Kenyans, we have to, as actually has been quoted, bite the bullet on this one
Yes.
and accept this fuel levy. Now it's at 8%, the proposal that is being put forward.
Yeah.
It's one way of raising the money that we need as a government.
No, you look at the budget itself entirely, is that we are talking about a deficit of 560 billion we have. So you remove the tax, let's say even that's included by plus the VAT that we are talking about 16% is included in that. So if this VAT doesn't go on, we're moving it to 600 and something. So it's a drop in the ocean. We are saving very little in terms of budget deficit. So the bigger conversation that we'll be having is how do we trim our budget and live within our means? It's not about the 16%. You're only getting 70 billion. Your budget deficit 560. It's just a drop in the ocean. You're not saving anything. There are people who are talking about reducing parliament itself and its allocation. It's a drop in the ocean. The biggest conversation that we have, that IMF even is strict on the new conditions, is that we need to reduce our budget, live within our means. And that is the bigger thing that we need to have. I'm sorry that the memorandum didn't talk about it. It talked about very few aspects.
Yes.
But we need to trim this budget by around 200 billion. That's where the conversation should be.
And then, as a member of parliament then, when you hear there's some recommendations to touch what goes to the constituency level in terms of the budgets, isn't it in the interest of the nation to get us out of the deficit? So whether it touches the CDF or not, in the general interest of Kenya's economy, isn't it something that we should all be looking at? There are compromises that should be made, in all honesty.
That's true. I'll accept that in all honesty and everything, we need to look at the way we survive as a country, especially when it comes to the debt servicing and the way people live. But when you look at the presidential memo, he's not being sincere when he talks of the budget cuts, because I've already highlighted he's only touching on institutions or funds that affect the lives of the common Kenyan, and is not addressing these other units which are, number one, more corrupt, which are overspending, which even sometimes the Auditor General has questioned like 60% of the expenditure.
Which units are you talking about?
Like, for example, let's look at State House. State House, when the president, when former President Kibaki was in office, he used to have a budget of 8 billion. Right now, President Uhuru has got a budget of 17 billion. Recently, the Auditor General said that the State House is not able to account for 60% of that budget. Then let's go back to another office, such as the Ministry of Defense. It has got a budget which sometimes even they don't want to disclose. And yet, when you look at Kenya and our neighbors, we don't have situations which will make you buy jet fighters or more artillery.
But there's always there's the current threat that's alive every day of terror.
Yes, it is there, but when you go into reality, you'll find that these threats are being managed by AMISOM. AMISOM is being funded by international bodies. And therefore, some of these other ministries, such as we have an Office of the President, we need the President to be realistic. Charity begins at home. He should first of all cut the budget in his own dockets, then tell the members of parliament or other Kenyans that now let's increase tax here or cut budgets.
Mheshimiwa Mwale, it sounds it would sound at least that you're saying not just us, even you, in Kenyan English. So if indeed he does make cuts within State House, then would you be okay with him touching your turf, so to speak?
Especially when you look at what is cutting and the economic conditions that Kenyans are facing. You know, it's very unfair. You are taxing fuel, then again you are telling Kenyans that you are being helped by CDF, I've cut that one. You are getting electricity using the transformers, have cut by 1.6 billion.
Yes.
The equalization fund, he has cut again. Then you come back to parliament, he has also cut 5 billion budget. So when you look at the reality, these things are going to make Kenyans to suffer more. Instead of Kenyans being motivated, they are going to suffer and even feel like they are not in their own country.
the resource that has been at your, I mean, it doesn't come from your pocket, but the resource that comes from, or that it's used within CDF, it actually is used within your constituency.
Yes.
And at the end of it, if used well, makes your administration look good. So yes, you're talking about touching the Mwananchi, but you're also touching my interest as Mheshimiwa. That's why I'm fighting this.
That one goes back even to the president. The president said that he wants to achieve the Agenda 4. And you see, even me when I was campaigning, there are things that I told people. And I was saying those things, the manifestos, because I knew that this is how things will be planned. So it's not a crime for me to say that if you deny me the CDF, then you are making me relevant, because that's the truth.
So it is true that you are fighting this because your interests have now
We
been
are not
touched.
fighting because of the interests of the Member of Parliament. It's because the CDA, we have seen what CDF is doing. And when you go even to these schools, like for example in the Ministry of Education, there is these funds for infrastructure. When you go to the ground, and I want you to challenge you, go to your village and you just go to a primary school and you ask the teachers to show you any infrastructure building that has been done by the Ministry of Education, you'll find none. But when you ask them for the CDF, they'll show you from 2012, 2013, 2014, up to now. And therefore, these things, the CDF has got a lot of impact. Like, for example, the president has reduced the money allocated to the roads. Because of the floods, the members of parliament had budgeted for some money to do the roads. He has reduced those funds. Now let's go back to the village. The roads are impassable. Even a farmer cannot transport the goods to the market. And you see, these people know that it's the responsibility of an elected leader. And this elected leader is the member of parliament, because the member of parliament is under the national government. So the president and him, they work together with the member of parliament. And then the governor works together with the MCA. So let's be sincere. As much as we'll talk about the CDF, the MPs are opposing because of the CDF, but the CDF is helping the common Kenyan.
Yes.
More than even what the ministry is doing.
All right. And Watima, I'm told, first of all, I don't know if we are crossing over to Parliament with Kennedy Mureithi, as can be expected. I wanted to bring in the issue of whether the government had already factored in this 16% that they anticipated. But we'll get to those figures in a bit. As you can expect, a lot is happening at Parliament. One or two people would want to give their current reactions as the lobbying continues about 2.5 hours to the special sitting at Parliament. So over to you, Kennedy Mureithi.
Well, thank you very much, Mark Masai. I've been watching your interview there in studio, and there is actually quite a bit of reaction from Member of Parliament there. But also, as we speak about that, there was a parliamentary group meeting that was happening in State House, chaired by the President himself, and we want to get a view from a veteran politician, one politician who's been in this town for quite some time, and he's come out and he wants to tell us what has really transpired at State House, and this is Maina Commander. You were at that meeting at State House.
Yes, I was.
What is the feeling? What is the agreement?
Let me say we were almost 190 Jubilee members of Parliament. We were invited there by His Excellency the President, just to explain to members why he referred the bill back to Parliament, and he did explain himself very well. To a point, we all agreed that we go by his endorsement and what he has said. And I think as Jubilee, because what the President did was not for himself, it was for Jubilee government. And we are Jubilee government, we are riding on a Jubilee manifesto, and we have to support it. And the questions that members were raising is about even consultation has not been very good on the side of members of Parliament. And it was explained, and it was very clear that next time, if there will be an issue that need the whipping of all members, at least the leadership in Parliament now will be more aggressive than ever before.
So probably what you're telling us is members of parliament voiced their objections first,
Yes.
before the president
Yes,
took you through
yes,
why
yes,
he made
yes,
this
yes.
particular
Yes,
decision.
even members of parliament talked about many issues, including CDF money, but they were told the government is not removing 2% CDF. The CDF money is still there. It's only that what was proposed to be added to CDF, and like other areas that the president has recommended for the cut, it is the cut that was not given. So there is nothing that members can say they are losing in this game. It's only that what was added that has not been implemented. And he put us through areas the government is going to cut, and somehow we all agreed with the president and the deputy president.
There was the contentious matter of the 8% VAT on fuel.
Yes.
That had been dropped from 16% that you had deferred for 2 years
Yes.
to 8%.
Yes.
But there is a feeling that it's still an increment because it's coming from 0% to 8%, and it's going to have a ripple effect on the common mwananchi. What was the reasoning behind this?
We all agreed for one, and I agreed with the president that from when he took over the government, there has never been increase in taxes, and he explained himself very well. And any development country, they depend on taxes, and the tax that he has proposed of 80%. You can imagine here in our own country where we have 40 million people, and we can say maybe 20% minors, they have not gone to the age of where they can pay the tax. Currently, the people who pay tax in this government, in this country, is 18%. Those are the people who have even given the return. And half of that number, they have given a zero return. So you can see maybe people who pay tax, you, me, and like other people, we are less than 1.something million. So what are you telling the government? With all what we want to do, there's nothing that that can happen. And he has talked even about the way he's tackling corruption, how he's fighting corruption, and we are supporting him on that. So we are saying, as the 8% he had proposed, we as a Jubilee member, we are coming to support him this after, or we will support him on that 8%.
Then there is the other question that has actually popped up, and it has been contentions with members of parliament, and this is with regard to the 0.05% that is going to be charged on housing. Yesterday, the nation had a nation leadership forum, and there was so much comment about this. Did it ever come up that probably people are thinking that it is going to be so much that an employer is going to contribute as much as you're going to contribute to cater for one of the pillars and of the Big Four agenda?
First of all,
housing?
there is nothing that have started on that levy. The levy itself has not started. And he was able to explain on how where he want to take this country from. And take, for instance, the 47 countries in this country. Counties are going to give land where it will be like public partnership with the county government and the people. And that is the only way you can give, let me say, for example, like Nyandarua County, where I come from. In Nyandarua County, we don't have houses. And you find the people who are in Nyandarua now, who are even working very senior in that county, they don't sleep in Nyandarua. If we have a program that can make people own houses there, you can imagine even how we can tap more people going to Nyandarua County. The other point is that by the time those houses are being constructed, what will happen? We will give our youth a job, we will create wealth, and we will create more job to our people. Suppose it happens to 48 counties. You can imagine what kind of people this government will be employing, and not even the government, even the county government.
Well, those are sentiments from veteran politician Maina Commander, who says that they were at State House this morning and they have been whipped, about 190 members, and they have been whipped and they are in unison, and they will be speaking with one voice come Thursday when this matter will be coming up for voting. This afternoon, we do expect that Speaker Justin Muturi will be giving the recommendations from the President, so that members of Parliament will be going through them, and then they will be able to make a conscious decision when it comes to Thursday, when they will be expected to vote on this matter. It is a matter that is still causing furore, and some of the members from the opposition are still adamant that they will marshal up numbers to shoot down these recommendations from President Uhuru Kenyatta. As Maina Commander has actually explained, he has insisted that, well, the President has taken them through the recommendations very well, so that they have been able to understand, to the point that he was even allowing questions from members of Parliament with regards to the CDF that has become very contentious, with regard to the Affirmative Action Fund that touches on them. And all these issues, the President has been able to explain to them that with this, we are looking at the country spurring growth, and more development is going to come out of it. Whether these members of Parliament will still go ahead and defy him on Thursday is a matter that we can only wait to see how members will be voting on that particular day. As of now, lobbying continues. Will the tune change with members of Parliament going publicly from the Jubilee side? Yet again, Mark, it is something that we can wait to see. Back to you.
It's seeming to be a game of numbers, Mureithi. One number there being thrown in, 190. Well, we'll see what's happening from Orange House with Vincent Odor as soon as we can get an update from him. But as earlier mentioned, the numbers that would be needed on Thursday with the debate and the vote would be 233. So Jubilee sounding or feeling strong with the number of MPs that were at State House, around 190, according to Maina Commander, who was there. Mheshimiwa, you're listening to what he was saying. What's your reaction?
First of all, we need to understand that we have three arms of government. We have the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And the Constitution is very clear that these arms should be independent of each of the other. And therefore, when I see my fellow MP like Honorable Commander saying openly that they went to State House and now the President has convinced them, the President is the executive. Us as parliamentarians, we need to make our own decision, not to be coerced or kind of convinced or forced to follow the President's advice.
Yes.
And therefore, I believe the members of Parliament went there, the Jubilee members went there because they fear intimidation. But the moment we get to the House, I'm very sure there is no member who will accept to support something that is going to make the lives of Kenyans very difficult.
And make the administration harder.
Exactly.
And Tony, there's an issue, and you'll respond to it as well. The CDF money, with an explanation there of Maina Commander that it's not really going to be affected. But the question is, are they going to reduce it? And then that then will definitely get rejection from the members of Parliament.
The problem is that we haven't seen the memorandum itself.
Yes.
But from Maina Commander's explanation, it doesn't make sense. Because there is a talk of cutting spending, and one of the targets is the CDF. At the same time, it talks that there will be no cuts in the CDF. So I'm torn, what exactly was he trying to say? But what MPs are saying is true, that the CDF, as amended today, is not managed by members of Parliament. So it's an independent body that, in fact, the allocation goes to the Ministry of Devolution. From the Ministry of Devolution, there is an office set up, a board. It's called the Independent CDF Board. Exactly. So they receive the money from the devolution. Then the devolution from the Ministry of Devolution. From that board, it goes to the management committees within the constituency levels. Now, the MPs are only patrons. So those committees are the ones who decide
Yes.
where those amounts are allocated. Previously, the members of parliament will influence how CDF is managed. But currently with the current structure, so they don't influence. So it's torn between the parliamentary side and the executive side within the Ministry of Devolution and stands independently. So it's not necessarily as it was before the members of parliament are the ones in charge of CDF.
Let's try imagine that, Mheshimiwa, this CDF issue wasn't there, it wasn't being touched, the equalization fund wasn't being touched. Would you then support this finance bill as has been passed, as has been recommended by the president?
No, I won't support, because even initially we had objected the 16%, and therefore we are not talking or opposing the president because of the CDF. You see, at the end of the day, the fuel prices affects the common Kenyan. Like, for example, when you go back to where I come from, the bus fare from Mumias to Butere was 40 shillings. Now it's 80 shillings. You can see it has really changed. It will force other people even to walk, or the person who was doing the farming, like selling products to the market, won't be able to take the products to Mumias so that he can earn a living. And therefore, the reality is that when you increase the tax on fuel, on petroleum products, you are going to make the Kenyans feel, the common Kenyan will feel more burdened than even those who can manage. And therefore, the president, we can recommend to the president as parliament what he needs to do. We are not objecting him from looking for ways of getting funding or money. But we are saying that he needs to use a formula that does not discriminate or put the lives of the common mwananchi into problems.
Yes.
Yes.
Then, I mean, someone says we're under pressure either way. So even though we would want to have him go to 0% for fuel, then what would you recommend and what would you put forward as legislators?
I think the president is biting more than what he can chew. That's the problem.
That's a problem. You've
Yes.
identified it. But
Yes.
what are you recommending then?
Like for example, surely why should you change police uniform? He's going to use 4 billion, and yet he's telling us that we've got a deficit. The present police uniform is not bad, or is not an urgent issue that needs like an emergency solution. He should just wait when the country is ready, then he changes the uniform.
Okay, that's something.
Yes.
That's something that
That's
came
something
after this,
Yes.
after the fact
Yeah.
of this fuel tax. But what sustainable recommendations would you give?
Sustainable recommendation is that the president needs to kind of limit more borrowing. That's number one. Because it looks like he came from China and he has been shown chances of being given more money, and therefore he's looking for more money to do what? To get the serviceability of the debts. And therefore he needs to reduce on the borrowing. That's number one. Then number two, we look for ways in which we can tax products that not many Kenyans use, like the luxury products. And when you look at the American government when Obama was the president, he exactly did that. He reduced tax on the products that are used by common people and increased tax on products that are used by the rich. And therefore, those are the fundamental issues
Okay.
that the president needs to.
As we think of recommendations that can be given or alternatives, Tony, there is a reality on the ground. We would all wish that, there's no fuel levy, at least it's not even at 8%. But besides what we would wish for, there's a reality of the forces at play. The president is clearly under pressure. What's the arm here of, for instance, the International Monetary Fund, beg your pardon?
Okay. let me answer a little bit the question that you asked, Mheshimiwa.
Okay.
We talk about, especially like Honorable Minor Commander talks about Jubilee's administration promises and legacy and all that. And I say this without political bias, that the legacy that Jubilee will leave, if we look at this memorandum itself, is that they will tax Kenyans to death. Kenyans will pay taxes through the nose and the teeth. This is the reason because, first, the 16% VAT. This is a consumption tax. because it's a sales tax. So when you buy things, you get. So it's a regressive in nature because it affects the guys at the bottom pyramid.
Yes.
Because you're trying to factor in the price of fuel as standard price for the rich and the poor. So the person who bears even 50 shillings, for somebody, we have 40% of Kenyans living below poverty line. For these people, 40 shillings or even 50 shillings is a lot for them.
Yes.
So even if government takes that, it means huge. So it squeezes this 16% VAT, or even if it's 8%, it squeezes a lot of money out of the poor than the rich. Second, that people are not talking about in the proposal, what I've heard is that there is a Robin Hood tax. The Robin Hood tax, in terms of that, we are taxing M-Pesa and bank transfers. Now, you look at that model, is that you're taxing volumes, you're taxing turnovers. You're not taxing productivity, you're not taxing capital. Because if I'm moving money, it doesn't mean it's productive.
Yes.
So when you're moving money, you're taxing that movement. And you look at the picture of M-Pesa, the transactions are between 10,000 to 20,000. Those are the average transactions. You look at that, it targets the middle class. We have a floating middle class that if such taxes are coming in, you push them down to the poverty line. That's the second. The third is that you're talking about the housing fund. Mm-hmm. The housing fund, you're talking about 0.05% of salaries of employers. Now, this one targets specifically people who are employed in the formal sector because those are the guys, their pay slips. Now, you look at the current structure that we have. These are the main guys who pay taxes because they are streamlined. You have a PIN, you have a pay-as-you-earn. KRA can identify your pay slip, and they deduct a pay-as-you-earn. So these are around 3 million people, plus the 700 within government, within public sector. You look at 16% of working population. We have around 12 million not paying taxes in income tax. Now, you're bringing a burden of the National Housing Fund to the 3 million people, a small percentage. What kind of a tax is this that you're saying in this memorandum? You're only taxing Kenyans because of your legacy.
Yes.
In the 5 years that we're talking about when they leave, it means that the only legacy Jubilee will have is that they are taxing people to death.
Higher tax, not high,
Yes, very high burden. But coming to the question on IMF, one of the biggest problems that we have is that we have a very weak parliament. Weak parliament.
He needs to hear that.
Yes, very weak parliament.
Yes.
Because parliament has become an extension of the executive. And we are here because of parliament. Reason being, we've overborrowed. One of the main things that within current law is that parliament has the debt ceiling to decide on how much government can borrow. Every time that in the previous 5 years that Treasury has been moving bills and finance bills and budgets, they have always been given what they want. Whether it's borrowing, whether it's revenue estimates and all that, Parliament has been passing it. We are here because Parliament removed a debt ceiling in 2014, moved it higher so that Jubilee can continue borrowing more. Yeah. Now, we are in a debt crisis because Parliament did do its job. IMF has come and said, what we agreed in 2013 is that your borrowing will be reduced to a manageable level. Your budget itself will be reduced to 5% deficit. Now, today, we are not around that. Now, what that means, Parliament, what IMF is telling us is that you guys have mismanaged your economy. You need to look at what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Now, what the president is trying to do is that he's trying to have both sides of IMF who are telling him, you need to reduce your spending, you need to reduce your budgets, you need to put your management of the economy together because it talks about the interest rate among the conditions and all that. At the same time, you talk about an overburdened taxpayer. So you have IMF telling you need to increase your revenue base. On the other hand, the taxpayer is telling you we've had so much taxes, we can't pay anymore. So they are caught in a hard place and a rock, and it's an own making. It's not that it's IMF. That's the biggest thing that we need to take into fact. This is a problem that we have from the executive and parliament. All of them dropped their balls. That we are here in this position today.
Yes.
So I would not want to be in the position of the Treasury, because on the other hand, you're in serious problems, on this hand, you don't know what to do.
Somewhat damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yes.
The element then of Parliament, because it's being thrown at executive, that they're not doing enough. The executive is not doing enough, and we should throw the blame to them. But then he brings up an issue. You've said the government should borrow less, but then it's also on you. You can influence that process.
Yeah, it's true. I want to support my brother here that Parliament, we have a weak Parliament, as in the opposition side, because majorly because of the handshake. Because of the handshake, nowadays it looks like even those that were in opposition tend to behave as if they're in government, and that's one of the major problems that we have. Then secondly, the last Parliament is the one that passed these issues which the economist is highlighting. Even the imposition of tax, it was passed in the last Parliament. And then when we came in, that's when we said, no, we need to come up with a way in which we'll postpone it to 2020. And therefore, I support him that the Parliament needs to be strong. But you see, the problem, I already highlighted it, that the Constitution is very clear that the three arms of government needs to be independent from each other. But you can see the President is calling members of Parliament to State House, and they are going. And then even some of them are already convinced that what the President. So the President is making a memo. Then he calls them the legislature side to lobby, and then the legislature it looks like it's buying into the President's proposal, and that's a mistake.
Yes, and also someone might say the lobbying is both ways. It's also happening at Orange House, so it's not just at State House.
That's why I said that the handshake, it's happening at Orange House because the Prime Minister, Raila, accepted to work with the President. And there was a day I addressed the media and I said, instead of us going for the handshake, and we make decisions which the common Kenyan is suffering, we better get out of the handshake, then we go back to the streets. Like me, I'm an unutilized resource. If by chance I get a chance, I'll mobilize people and we run on the streets telling the President the truth. And that's what I'm going to do.
I have a suggestion for Mheshimiwa.
Throw in a suggestion.
One of the main things that people will be looking at in how many people will be voting for this 8% the President's proposal. So what you can help us as the public is that avail the list of those who voted for it. Then we can push for those within the electorate to hold them accountable, because we are having a weak Parliament. The only way that we can hold them accountable is those who chose them, to ask them questions. If you voted for 8%, why did you vote for it? If you didn't vote for it, if you opposed it, why did you vote for it? So we need to hold people accountable, especially these times that we have a weak Parliament. The electorate have to step up and tell them, we are having an 8%, we have a burden. Why did you pass this?
Yes.
And you see, just responding to what he has said, you know, they have even proposed that we do the digital voting, where we use the card, just because State House wants to know who was against and who was for them. Okay. Therefore, it's double-edged. Yeah, we will know those who are with the common people, and then those who are with the common people will get victimization from State House.
Okay.
Yes.
That having been said, let's conclude with my panel on your reactions from that.
First of all, I think it was an ODM PG, not a NASA PG.
All right.
Yeah. Then secondly, you see they are giving conditions that they'll support for 1 year. So it needs to be amended. And I'm not seeing the time for amendment. Therefore, I think it's just a strategy of them saying no unless you amend to 1 year. Yes. And then secondly, you can prove from what the whip was reading that the opposition is very weak, because they are giving in to government side. Okay. They are trying to support the government, and the government is trying to humiliate the common Kenyan. And therefore, my stand is that I'm for no. I'm still there, and I'm not moved by the purported NASA resolution.
It was an opportunity to stand the test of being independent for legislators. Yeah. Your reaction?
My reaction, number one, is that the taxpayer is on his own, according to the NASA statement. Second is that there needs to be a clarity here about an impending unconstitutionality. Is that when that memorandum comes to Parliament and they fail to get 2/3 to overturn it, those who are opposing like him, it needs that if it goes through, it means that we need we go back to a default setting. It's not that memorandum passes as law, because it's not a legislation. It doesn't go through the legislation process.
Yes.
So a new bill has to start afresh on the new requirement. So we go to a default setting is that Robin Hood tax will not be there, but the 16% VAT comes into effect.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Tony Watima, our resident economist, I may call you, and Mheshimiwa Butere Member of Parliament, that is Tindi Mwale. Thank you for your time and candid discussion on this. We'll be watching at 2:30. We'll be live from Parliament.